Now I'm working on a romantic comedy since 2 years. This is not irrelevant. You know, we can make a comedy from Afghanistan. We have the first kiss in Afghan cinema history gonna happen in that film. It is a very political film. As far as I know, this is the first time that we are talking about Afghanistan in a romantic comedy genre, you know, and Afghanistan is usually defined by red, not by pink, you know, but this film is very pinky. But on the other hand, I think it is important, especially now, for me as a filmmaker, I need more hope. And I need to love, and I need colors, and I need pink. Now, for example, like filmmakers from Afghanistan, from Syria, you know, from Iran, there is always this expectation for them that they have to make films related to politics or related to important subjects or related to, you know, current situation of the country, or reproduce the same kind of image that the world expects from Afghanistan, from these countries. I'm not angry, yeah, I'm really dreaming about one day that Afghan filmmakers can, you know, feel confident with their stories, with our stories, and just make films that they are so relevant to the culture, to the audience, you know, because Afghanistan is really rich in terms of culture and in terms of, you know, stories and tales, and it's really sad that the world doesn't know Afghanistan, and it's even more sad that the Afghan artists, don't know their own country. I think if there is any hope for Afghan cinema, it will be now.
Hi, how are you doing? Welcome to Zinemaldiaren podcast, the audio inventory of some of the events taking place at the San Sebastián Film Festival. Just a few weeks after the Taliban's violent seizure of power in Afghanistan, director Shahrbanoo Sadat gave a masterclass at the 69th San Sebastián Film Festival. The author of films such as Wolf and Sheep and The Orphanage, which took part in the Cannes Filmmakers Fortnight, spoke about the difficulties of being a director in her country. The talk took place in Tabakalera's room and was moderated by Archivo project coordinator and C365 team member Irati Crespo.
Kaixo, eskerrik asko etortzeagatik, muchas gracias por venir. Welcome, Shahrbanoo. Thank you for being with us today here. Shahrbanoo Sadat nació en Teherán en 1991. Estudió un taller de cinema verité que fue como un punto de inflexión bastante grande en su carrera y en su decisión de entrar en la industria cinematográfica. Fue la candidata más joven en ser seleccionada en la residencia artística de Cannes, la Cinefundación, a los 19 años. Ha producido, escrito y dirigido 3 cortometrajes y sus 2 últimos largometrajes fueron seleccionados en la Quincena de realizadores del Festival de Cannes, Wolf and Sheep y The Orphanage. Sus películas se han estrenado en Locarno, Rotterdam o Chicago, entre otros, y tenemos la suerte de tenerla hoy aquí porque hace un mes fue evacuada junto a su familia de Kabul y tenemos la posibilidad de hablar y charlar hoy con ella. La masterclass no va a versar sobre su cinematografía ni sobre corrientes cinematográficas, pero quería hacer hincapié en que hablará sobre todo sobre el estado de la industria en Afganistán de los últimos 20 años y que hacia el final de la conversación se abrirá un turno de preguntas para el público. Maybe we can start by discussing the situation and the challenges of the cinematography industry in the last 20 years in Afghanistan.
Well, let me tell you a little bit about the Afghan cinema during the Soviet time, then I link it to the last 20 years. During the Soviet time, from 1979 to 1992, Afghan Film Institute was a governmental office place, and filmmakers, they got funded directly by the state, and they had to make propaganda film. in favor of Soviet government, pro-Soviet government in Afghanistan. And that's why we have a lot of films. We have a lot of propaganda films from the late 70s and full 80s and then beginning of 90s. And in 1992, it was very similar to present time, to now, because the Democratic Republic of Afghanistan just collapsed, and Mujahideen, who we are fighting for since 1979, they got Kabul, and the president couldn't. The only difference is that on that time the president couldn't escape, and he had to go to UN office, and for 4 years he was in lockdown during the whole civil war in Afghanistan. And then finally in 1996, Taliban arrived and ended the civil war, but then they started their own government for 5 years. During all these years, 4 years of civil war and then 5 years of Taliban, for 9 years there was nothing, and a lot of filmmakers, either they got killed, either they immigrated, either they went to asylum, or they were like in Iran and Pakistan living under really bad condition, and absolutely they didn't have any chance to make film or even to think about making movies. And then in 2011, back to your question, in 2001, after 11/9 and American and international community invaded Afghanistan, suddenly there were a lot of money, like tons of money, that we are spending for Afghanistan, in Afghanistan. And because of this reason, a lot of NGOs, they started to shape. And a lot of people, they started to register their own NGOs because there were like a lot of projects on certain subjects. It was very similar for me to the Soviet time, because in the last 20 years, like these NGOs, they never said that it's a propaganda film, but in a way it was propaganda film, because they receive money, let's say, they receive a very big money from cultural part of American embassy or other cultural parts of other embassies, and then they had to make movies about women situation or women rights and election and drugs and like this kind of subjects. And yeah, so a lot of people, they have this interest to gain money. That's why they become filmmaker. And that was not a reason that, let's make film because film is important. No, because money was there. So a lot of people, they started to register their own NGO, their own production companies. And suddenly we had hundreds of filmmakers trying to make these short films or documentaries. And I think since 2010, a lot of films have been made with these particular subjects, and some of them they could go to festivals internationally, but some of them they were screened in TVs, in different channels in TV in Kabul, or even in some festivals. But after 2010, and particularly after 2014, because in 2014 also a big number of American troops, they left Afghanistan, and that was kind of, the time that a big wave of, a big number of people started to immigrate from Afghanistan to go somewhere else, and especially talents, journalists, filmmakers, artists, educated people. And then there was not any money that much, because for culture it was never a lot of money compared to other fields, but still there were a chunk of money before 2014, but then after 2014 nothing really. And there was also something about Afghan filmmakers, that filmmaking was never for many Afghan artists, for many Afghan filmmakers, filmmaking was never like a career. It was always like a hobby. They always had a job in a TV or in other places, and then they had this ambition to make films with friends and with little money. And even though we didn't have, we had a number of short film and documentaries, but the number of like an annual production of feature film in Afghanistan in the last 20 years, it was zero. And for me, I was just told you before we start the talk that like in the last month, especially when I'm talking to press and press asking me like, what will happen to the artist, what will happen to the filmmaker, that now Taliban even, they said that there is no, they said it directly, that there is no space under the Sharia law for artists, and artists, they have to change fields, And I got a lot of questions from press that, but what will happen to the artists? And I'm ashamed to say that we didn't do that much in the last 20 years. So I'm not worried about that, And yeah, and I think like things actually started after 2014. Like from 2015 to 2021, we had like 4, 5, 6 titles of feature films that they mostly were made by Afghan filmmakers that they lived abroad. But they were interested to Afghanistan, and they traveled forth and back to Afghanistan, and they had these films, and these films went to biggest festivals like to Cannes, to Berlinale, to Venice, to IDFA, to Hot Dog, and I mean, we had representative from Afghanistan on these festivals, but if I compare these productions with these numbers with all the opportunities that we could have or we had in the last 20 years, I think that the speed of Afghan cinema was super slow, but the only hope was like we are on a line and we could go forward, and I think we were on our way to going forward, but the walk took a very long time, and we needed more time. But now I think. Let me tell you something else. There is also something about Afghanistan image in the industry, in the world cinema, because there are many films about Afghanistan made by international filmmakers, Iran, like neighboring countries, India, or even Hollywood or European productions, and in my opinion, not as a filmmaker, just as an ordinary person from Afghanistan, they are very bad films. Even though some of them they got admired by big festivals, they won awards. But when you see them as an Afghan audience, they are just bad films. They just stay on surface. They're talking about cliches all the time, And they are reproducing the same kind of image that the world already know about Afghanistan. So there is nothing fresh or new there. And the very sad thing about this, for me, as a filmmaker, is these movies stand as reference even for Afghan artists, even for local Afghan filmmaker. Because of many reasons, I don't know, we are not really aware of the importance, of our own stories. And I think we don't have the confidence we don't have the confidence to share our stories. And that's why we are always looking at those films as reference, and we are just reproducing the same thing. So with the money from NGO, with the filmmakers, don't take the job of filmmaking as an official career, like with many reasons, we couldn't, like the image that we produced in the last 20 years was not really interesting. And I think if there is any hope for Afghan cinema, it will be now. Because now, even though a lot of artists, a lot of filmmakers, they have stayed in Afghanistan, they didn't have any chance to go out, but a big number, they got evacuated. And one of the big problem in Afghanistan was, whenever you talk with Afghan artists, it was they were complaining about money, that there is no money and there is no film industry in Afghanistan. And I think now that they are not living in Afghanistan, I think it's a very good time for them, for us to look to Afghanistan with a distance, and like to get integrated with the society that living now, and and try to connect us to European film industry, and and get the time and think about Afghanistan. I am hopeful in that sense that if we move, maybe in the next 10 years we have more Afghan films than we had in the last 20 years, with all these doors that are open now.
In the light of the current events, as you said, a lot of evacuations were possible. So I would like to ask you, what do you think are the responsibility of the funding bodies, international funding bodies, for your colleagues, for Afghan filmmakers in Europe, or what is the responsibility in the future of the Afghan filmmaking made abroad?
Well, there was one thing about this evacuation thing that, well, let me tell it like this. In Afghanistan, Afghanistan was #1 corrupted country in many statistics. And we had 3 governments since the last 20 years, and 3 of them were corrupted as hell, really damaged. And they didn't care about culture, they didn't care about art, they only cared about power and money. And we had, even though in cinema and culture, no one cared, or no one, you could not really find a lot of money in culture in compare of other fields, still we had this cultural mafia in Afghanistan. And we are these 20 people or 50 people that we were doing festivals, even though we didn't have that many movie production, but we had many festivals that they go to first edition, second edition, and then it was cut, and then a new festival with subjects soldier film festival, about police, about national army, women film festival, young film festival, animation, all kind of film festival. And then in all this film festival, it was only these 50 films that circulating from one festival to another, and then the same people giving award to the same people. So it was a circus, it was a joke, but it was very important, because in Afghanistan, from the culture people, we didn't really talk about this stuff. We accept it as it was, and if young filmmakers, they wanted to get recognized, as a filmmaker, they had to find a way for themselves to enter to this mafia. And many filmmakers, they did that, and the ones who didn't, they were outsider, and they never get recognized as a filmmaker. They were never invited to any film festival. They didn't have the title of filmmaker. They were not welcome in gathering or parties or whatever for filmmaking, and they were invisible. And the same thing with evacuation happened, that when the evacuation happened, there were lists, there were peoples that they were in charge of lists. And then they had to fill this list with names, and particularly some of this list dedicated to artists. But the artists who couldn't speak English or didn't have international friends, and we are not part of this mafia, they were left alone in Afghanistan because no one cared about them. And the list got filled with families and relatives under the name of artist, and they got evacuated, as easy as that. And that was very sad for me, because I was in the when on 24th of August, I was after 72 hours, when me and part of my family, we could go, we could finally pass to American checkpoint. We are taken by French soldiers to French compound at the airport, and then I saw a lot of people that I didn't know them at all, but they said that they were there because they are artists. And then I had, at the same time, I received phone calls and messages and emails from my classmates or people I knew, or even people I didn't know, and they were asking me for help. And that was really a sad moment, because I was powerless and I couldn't help. And even part of my family, they stayed in my apartment. And I think now, for example, we have a lot of local artists, like let's not talk only about cinema, but also people in music. A lot of local singers, they don't live even in Kabul, they live all around Afghanistan in other provinces. And in Kabul, at the moment, we have press. So Taliban are in front of cameras of many journalists. But in other provinces, there is no press. So Taliban are very harsh and very, very tough with people, and they're killing. They killed like local artists in Badakhshan, in north of Afghanistan, in other provinces, and this, even this news never ended in the press because no one from international press know this local artists, So I think there are many people that they left in Afghanistan, the real vulnerable and fragile one. And we are still thinking like to find a way, not only me, but also other people's, trying to find a way for these people. But of course, it's very difficult because we are talking about a big number. And it's not only like artists, or it's also like women, people working for women right defenders, or like journalists, like other kind of people. So still, even though like a lot of people, they got evacuated, but many more, they have left in Afghanistan. And so far, like I'm in contact with Afghanistan 24 hours since I left, and people don't have any hope they don't see any future to live under Islamic Emirates, and everyone is thinking to leave. That's why there are many queues in front of like borders in Pakistan, in Tajikistan, in Iran, and everyone just want to live. Life is very difficult. They don't have access to their bank accounts. Even I don't have access to my bank account, because even though I have like the card, the MasterCard, but the central bank is banning. And and then people have to make a very long queue, like stand in the sunlight for hours just to get like a few bucks from the bank, and it's just like and Taliban are just every day they're making a new rule, and their mentality is very clear. For me, I don't know why it's not clear for some people, And well, I think I know this is like pure politics. Now I'm a little bit irrelevant to your question, but let me say this because I think it's important. I think this is pure politics, that there is this idea that they're saying that Taliban have changed, or they're talking about this moderate Taliban. This is not existed in real world. Taliban is a terrorist group, and they will remain a terrorist group, and a terrorist group can never be changed. And I think this is pure politics, that countries, governments, they are saying that we have to make conversation, we have to give them a chance, This is just, for me, I just love about this, because like no one with brain can say this or can believe this. And I think their point of view, their opinion about women, about artists, about even, not women, but even about men, about human, it's so clear. They're anti-human. And I hope I answer your question.
While I was listening to you, I was thinking about you being in contact with Afghanistan for like the last days, and I was curious about the artistic scene right now in Afghanistan, with all those people left behind, your colleagues, filmmakers, colleagues, musicians, artists, and if you could go further into detail about those artists, and also what's the situation, the educational status in Afghanistan, like in filmic or artistic, if there have been any film schools, if they have been like funding bodies helping film schools, or if you could go further into detail.
In before,
yes.
You mean? Yeah. Well, there was one address, like one Faculty of Fine Arts in Kabul University, where they had like different departments, and one of this department was dedicated to cinema. It was, in the beginning, it was cinema and theater, but then later they separated, so it was like fully for cinema. And I was a student there in 2008. And after 3 semesters, I left it because I found it very boring, and I found it really like, it was just such a waste of time because the teachers, they had no idea of cinema, they had no idea of how you should make film. And I knew a lot of people, a lot of students that they graduated after 4 years or 5 years and they couldn't even hold a camera, they couldn't even make a film. So there was nothing like a practical filmmaking. It was just reading and memorizing all this huge text from Iranian books, and from 30 years ago, 40 years ago, nothing was new. And so it was only this. And then there were some workshop. I mean, despite of all disappointing stuff, there were also some good stuff. One of them, it was this French workshop called Atelier Varan. And I was a participant there in 2009. They were in Afghanistan since 2002 or 3. And they did this short-term 3 months workshop in Kabul for young men and women, and their focus was on cinéma vérité, direct cinema, and they did like different workshop in different years. I was in the last year. And the festival, the workshop ended because my teacher, Stéphane Blanche, he got killed in a suicide attack in 2010 in his guest house. He was staying in an Indian guest house, and there was and then they did one more round of festival because my teacher came to Kabul to finish this round, but then he couldn't. But then his colleagues from France, they came to Kabul and they finished that round, and since then it was just finished. But in this under this Atelier Varan umbrella, I think more than like 25 or 26 short documentaries have been produced that, in my opinion, they are the best of Afghan cinema in the last 20 years. Because even though, for me, those 3 months, they are the only academic background in my career so far, But it was very important for me, and for me it was kind of turning point because everything was so simple, and the definition, like everything was so simple, but it was very important, and I think like we learned the basic of cinema documentary there. And even though when I graduated from there, I never made any more documentaries. For some reasons, I was in love with fiction cinema, but I was also in love with cinéma vérité. So I tried to use like this observation and this attachment to reality and truth into my films. I think I was I see myself like a free daughter of cinéma vérité. But I think their role was very important in terms of training young filmmakers, and I'm really like I have a lot of respect for them and for what they did in Afghanistan, because they were, despite of other NGOs and other places, that they wanted to make money with these workshops and with this making festivals and making films and stuff. They were really came to Kabul and taking the risk and train these young filmmakers. I think, in my opinion, they are really very important, like super important in the last 20 years in Afghanistan.
So we could be talking about a new generation of filmmakers.
Now, these students from, I think we were like 22 or 25 maybe, and they were all spread all around, within the last years. We were all spread in different parts, and it was me who stayed in Kabul, and then I think 3-4 more people in Kabul. And now with this evacuation, they also got evacuated. But one of us, he stayed in Kabul, and he refused to come back because he didn't have any family, and he thought he thought that he doesn't have responsibility regarding other people, so he will stay there. But I don't know, because I don't know if he wants to make any film or stuff, but but I think even though so far the students of Atelier Varan didn't really make a big career since then, but I think they learned something very important, and they're gonna use that in soon future, hopefully.
I recall that we were talking about production, but also in our previous conversation we were talking about the archival politics, and I found really interesting the decisions of not making the archive public. So maybe if you could talk about that.
Yes, the part of Afghan archive was kept in the national TV, and then a part of it was kept in Afghan Film Institute, and then a part of it was in National Archive, and like some years ago, the president of that time, Ashraf Ghani, he decided to move the archive from Afghan film to Presidential Palace, because he was saying that archive is kept under not a very good condition in Afghan film, and he had this idea of keeping archive in his palace close to him. And and this made a very big discussion in Kabul, especially among people involving in culture. By this act, even before this, access of artists, not public, but artists or filmmakers, it was very difficult to access to this archive. Myself, I had the experience of I wanted to use this archive for my movie, The Orphanage, some years ago, before I was doing research. So I knew that there was a film, a documentary about the real orphanage, the actual orphanage in 80s, and I wanted to just watch that film. But then I had to run after paperwork for 1 year, 1 full year. And, just going from culture ministry to Afghan film, from Afghan film to national TV, from national TV to some, it was just, I was like a ball, like a football ball, And it was really tiring, and many people, they didn't have energy. But this was very important for me to watch that film as a reference. So I did this 1 year thing, 1 year marathon. And and then after I was invited to a room where I could see this movie with the supervision of two other people who worked there. And it was very difficult because they didn't let me take picture, and they didn't, and I had to, there was a logo of the orphanage that I wanted to take picture. They didn't let me, and I had to draw it. I had to stop the film and draw it, and my drawing is really bad, so. And I had to draw this, and I, even though I said to them that I'm not using this, I'm making a fiction film, and this is a documentary, it's only for my research. They said to me, like, even if you want to see it outside of the TV, you have to pay it. And it was very expensive. It was like 5,000 rupee per minute, which is like $70, $80 per minute. And the film was like 40 something. It was impossible for me to get it. But even on that time, having access to this, it was very difficult. But then when they moved the archive from Afghan film and from National TV to Presidential Palace, it was even more difficult because it was in Presidential Palace, and then more paperwork was added to this. I didn't visit the archive in Presidential Palace myself, but some people, they did, and they said they couldn't, like they tried, but they couldn't because it was very complicated. And now, this is a big question, what will happen to archive, because Taliban, they're very clear, they're saying that, filmmaking is not allowed, even though I don't understand why they're saying that, because Taliban, themselves, they're using cinema to make these propaganda films. They are using the skills, the language of cinema to pitch them and their mentality, and they're very successful on that, because I was watching these movies of them for many years. I opened the website and watching these propaganda films, like 2 hours, 3 hours films, and they were very successful on what they wanted to do. So I have no idea why they're using cinema, but cinema is allowed for them, but it's not allowed for others. And with this mentality, I don't think that they see any importance in archive. And just to make it even more clear who they are, I think archive is in danger. And they burn part of it in 90s, in beginning of 20s actually, and they can do it again. and there was a project to digitalize archive. I think they did it like 40-50%, but this never could end. And and I don't really understand, because I don't really understand what was the purpose of keeping archive not for public, because this doesn't make sense, like students, like people, curious people, like everyone should have access to archive, and they can see a lot and learn a lot, especially in Afghanistan. Like in the last 42 years, we have a lot of moments in the history that they are just going to repeat themselves again and again and again, and I think it's very important for people, for Afghan people, to have this knowledge and to have this image of the last something years of history in Afghanistan. But no, I think archive is something in Afghanistan. Archive is something very political, and even though they have no idea of the importance of it, they keep it. They keep it as a treasure, They keep it they kept it as a treasure. They kept it, and they wanted no people have access to it easily. And now it's Taliban. They are in presidential palace, and I saw in the TV in a reportage that archive was under very good condition with the right temperature, in the shelves, in a room that was built for archive, which was not the case in Afghan film or national TV. But I don't know what will happen to this. So far, there is no news about this. I hope Taliban, they don't know about it, except if someone tell them.
And looking forward, in the next couple of years or 5-10 years, as you were foreseen before, how do you think the Afghan cinema made abroad will change in terms of aesthetics and themes?
Well, I think, as I said before, I think this will be, if I want to, because at the moment everything is just everything is just all over the place. And if I want to see a good thing among all this mess, I think it will be this imaginary future for Afghan cinema that might shape in Europe or out of Afghanistan because of this evacuation thing. That now many filmmakers, many artists, they're out, and this is the first time for many of them. This is the first time in life that they're out, and they have this opportunity to look at Afghanistan from a different, fresh point of view. And I think with the time that they have here and with the possibilities, and I think it is very possible that they, a new wave of cinema, let's say, will shape in the next 10 years, maybe, or 15 years, because of course, this will never happen immediately, because a lot of people, they got evacuated in France, in Germany, in Denmark, in other countries, and first they have to learn these languages, then they have to find their place in the society, and it will take 4 or 5 years to integration, and I think then after that it's time to, maybe I can make film, maybe I can make my art. How does it work? What is the system? Maybe I can get help from this institute. Maybe there is a fund there, maybe I can use it, because this system, a healthy system, was not existed in Afghanistan. And even a bad financial system was not existed in Afghanistan either. So in terms of money, it was always this idea for Afghan filmmakers, even the ones who didn't live in Afghanistan, who lived, in Europe. There was always this idea around Afghan cinema that filmmakers should make small movies with little money, with a crew of friends, just something rock and roll. Why? Because we don't have a film industry, because filmmaking is not our career, because we are not enough brave to take the take the challenge, and to find ways to finance our movies and dream bigger. I think this is something that indirectly the world cinema is telling also to countries like Afghanistan, with no cinema industry, that they always have to be little, like don't dream, don't dare to dream something bigger. And I just don't like it, even though I don't believe that the film should be really expensive, and I don't believe on this. I think the content is important, and the content will direct the director and producer to make the best product. But I don't like when there are rules, when there are or even for the genre, for the content, like, for example, like filmmakers from Afghanistan, from Syria, from Iran, there is always this expectation for them that they have to make films related to politics or related to important subjects or related to current situation of the country, or reproduce the same kind of image that the world expects from Afghanistan, from these countries. I'm not agree. I think I'm interested to make. Now I'm working on a romantic comedy since 2 years, and I'm gonna shoot it next year. And I think this is not irrelevant. We can make a comedy from Afghanistan, because life there is really a comedy, especially now with this situation. This is a pure comedy. It's like one way is tragedy, but the other round is comedy, and these two, you can never separate this together. And I think with other genres, Afghan filmmakers can tell their own stories in a better way, ignoring those bad references, and just trying to think about their stories. And because I'm thinking about Afghan cinema, but of course this Afghan cinema is not existed now. But I'm really dreaming about one day that Afghan filmmakers can, feel confident with their stories, with our stories, and just make films that they are so relevant to the culture, to the audience, and they really carry the values in Afghan society, and Afghan people can feel proud watching them, and not just be ashamed or get angry that this is another film about Afghanistan and get disappointed. I think it's important that Afghan filmmakers get this knowledge and understanding about their culture and be proud of it, because Afghanistan is really rich in terms of culture and in terms of stories and tales, and it's really sad that the world doesn't know Afghanistan, and it's even more sad that the Afghan artists don't know their own country. So I think part of it can happen now with this evacuating artists in Europe, with the opportunities and all open doors.
I think there's a beautiful challenge now, looking at that distance, to renew languages, to critically revisit the filmmaking made in Afghanistan. I think there's a beautiful challenge out there. Me gustaría abrir el turno de preguntas.
I would like to open up the QA or interact with our invited guest. So whoever's got a question, please raise your hand, and they will give you microphones. I hope you can hear me, yes?
More about the romantic comedy you're working on.
You don't want to know about this? Well, this romantic comedy, my purpose, I was working on this project since 2 years ago, and as I said, the plan was to finish it, to go to shooting next year, and the final film could be finished on 23. And my purpose on that time was to make a film about present time in Kabul with the life of middle class. But present time obviously was so fast for me to catch, so now it's not a present time anymore, because in present time Talibans are there, and in my film Talibans are not there. So, but still, I'm thinking, because for me as a filmmaker, in the last month, it was a really a big question, because I try to make it really short, and excuse me if I don't make sense, because my head is just full of all kind of things. But there are some moments with things in Afghanistan with part of my family left in my apartment, with my friends, with, like with all general condition, I am questioning the power of cinema, and I'm questioning my career. And I'm questioning if I am more useful making film, or if I'm more useful going back to Kabul and joining the women on the street. So I have this, this big question for me, where I can be more useful. And there are sometimes some hours that I'm really down and negative, and I think like cinema is too small, and the change through cinema takes so much long, and I want change, because I saw the change in Kabul like this. Like next day, it was very good, and then the day after, Taliban, we are just in my street. And but now I'm positive. And answering to your question, I think it is important to make a film about the last 20 years in Afghanistan, because in the last 20 years, we lived under the flag of democracy. Life in Kabul was much different. And for middle class, for women, we had a lot of opportunities, even though on the work, in the university, in families, we received violence, discrimination, like all these things that happen also other parts of the world, not only in Afghanistan for women. But in this film, I'm focusing on a TV channel in Kabul where I worked. I got my first job there. I worked there for 5 years. I was a producer of a cooking show, which I hate because I hate cooking. Now I like, but that time I hate. And I was just this woman, like got my first job in this TV, and I wanted to go to a music show, like I wanted to be the producer of biggest show, but I was underestimated because I was a woman, and I was a small woman, So I was stuck with that cooking show. And in this film, I'm talking about the TV, about like a female camera operator who is stuck in this cooking show thing, and she's dreaming to go to the news. And finally, after an accident, she goes there and she met a man there. And he's like the most recognized journalist in the TV. And they go together to Kabul to cover all kind of news, and they fall in love, of course. And we have the first kiss in Afghan cinema history gonna happen in that film. So yeah, I think it is it is not like a cheap comedy for me. I think it is actually, in my opinion, it is a very political film, because this is as far as I know, this is the first time that we are talking about Afghanistan in a romantic comedy genre, and Afghanistan is usually defined by red, not by pink, but this film is very pinky. But on the other hand, I think it is important, especially now, for me as a filmmaker, I need more hope. And I need to love, and I need colors, and I need pink now, So I will be very glad to work on this project as soon as possible. And I think for Afghan audience, and also for like international audience, it's also important to see a little bit about Afghanistan, a little bit about the culture, because despite of all ugly things, there we are also beautiful things that I think we need to keep it in record and memorize it and appreciate it. So I'm gonna talk about all this, but you have to wait.
Okay. I know that the situation is hard and it can change in a matter of days, but I would like to know your personal opinion about the future of cinema in Afghanistan in the following years.
Well, I think the situation in Afghanistan at the moment is really hopeless, but I also believe that Taliban cannot keep Kabul for a very long time, because people are changed and women are changed. You might see footages from demonstrations in Kabul, and women are just at the front line, and it made me really proud and jealous also, because I'm not there. But I don't think that these people, they are not people from 90s. They are changed, and they have an idea of how life is, in the world, and they cannot minimize themselves that much. I don't believe that Taliban can keep Kabul for a very long time. But on the other hand, if I compare it to, for example, Islamic Republic of Iran, like to Iranian Revolution, they also didn't expect that they stay longer, but they stay until now, like 42 years, so this might also happen. But I think my fear is, I don't believe that Taliban, like my personal opinion, I don't believe that Taliban can keep Kabul, but my fear is that the civil war starts. And that's like the worst thing, worse than Taliban, because at the moment Taliban is only like one terrorist group, but in Afghanistan there are more than 20 registered terrorist groups from Uzbekistan, Muslims from China, from Chechen, from Iran, like from Pakistan, from all over the world. Afghanistan is the house of terrorists with this irresponsible act of America now and international community. So I think soon, and there are a lot of conflicts between the Taliban themselves, but also between these terrorist groups. So now they want to put highlight on ISIS to make people scared, to say that, ISIS, they are the real danger. We have to get united with Taliban to fight with them, So even though now Taliban taking Afghanistan, the suicide attacks and explosion not gonna stop. They're gonna continue, happen more, and then the responsibility will fall on ISIS or other groups. And I'm really afraid that another, like a civil war will happen in Afghanistan. And especially now that airport is not functioning, really, it's not open to public. And there are people that they don't want to live there. They are stuck. And I think everyone should have the right to move wherever they want. And many people that are stuck there, they have no chance. And my biggest fear is the civil war, because with Taliban, maybe a lot of minimizing, but still there are some spaces that people can use for doing demonstration, for nowadays, like right now. But but with civil war, it's just like and we had this experience of civil war for 4 years in Kabul. It's like a door-to-door fight. It's like, people coming to you, even though if you don't go to the street, people coming to you. So it's really like a lot of killing, and I'm afraid, I hope that this won't happen. And about your question, what will happen to the cinema? I think I explained that, didn't I? Like, probably the filmmakers that they are in Afghanistan, I don't believe that they have the opportunity to make films. Maybe some documentaries. I don't know. I've not heard about anything, but maybe it's too early also, because at the moment people are struggling with surviving, so it's not time for art or cinema. But maybe if there will be any film, it will be like these documentaries with mobile, filming situations, and and the filmmakers that they are outside, they're also busy with integration, with this applying asylum and stuff. So I think now, if there is any film about Afghanistan, it will be by Afghan filmmakers who left Afghanistan before, and now they have a passport from, I don't know, like other countries, and they are more settled, and they, if there is any production of films in the next years, it will be these Afghan filmmakers in abroad that they're gonna make it. The other filmmakers inside and the ones who got evacuated newly, it will take time for them to have the possibility to make a film.
Yeah, we had in our Asian Film Festival Barcelona, we had 2 of your feature films, Wolf and Sheep and The Orphanage. Well, thank you for being here, because it has been very interesting what you were saying. And I wonder about many things, because all of a sudden Afghanistan appeared. We have Afghan films since the festival started in 2011, and people were watching these films as a very exotic thing, or, well, this is Afghanistan, it's a small country. And nowadays, all of a sudden, the map is a different one. Afghanistan is in the center of Asia, in Central Asia, and all of a sudden people become aware of that country. I mean, it's no longer a country where you had the Americans, which were there since 2001, but all of a sudden people wonder about the history of the country, or for the last 50 years, And you think, this is, on a way, it's very important, because it happened to be, and all of a sudden too, you saw how in the whole world none of the embassies representing Afghanistan were the country itself outside the country. You know, all the embassies, all of a sudden, were, well, we are not representing Afghanistan. The country changed its name. It is just really a very important thing. All was collapsed. The system from the outside world, from the Afghans represented in the embassies, no embassies had receiving or were receiving the money which were, you know, coming from the United States, which the whole system is a very incredible one. I mean, we don't know exactly what's happening there, but when you see all the embassies collapsing around the world, all the Afghan embassies, all the ambassadors, all the personnel just in the embassies, I think this is a very important story. You know, this is on one side. On the other side, you know, the National Museum of Afghanistan in Kabul, the project was born by a Spanish architect, Antonio Foraster, and all of a sudden he had completed the whole project, the whole story for 5 years, and that was finished on July, and that disappeared too. I mean, that is a story, and the other story is the evacuations that have been happening in the country with the Soviet invasion, which were cruel evacuations, and the evacuations now. These are 2, 3 things, different things, but they are really giving another image of the country. I would like to know if you think, well, from outside, you know, we have a vision of the country, and what are these filmmakers who remain in the country because they could not go outside or they didn't want to go outside? Well, it will happen the same that happened in many countries when people stayed and they will try to realize how they can do cinema, you know, through comedy or through to show what's happening, because in the end, you know, really, reality becomes impossible. But please, I would like you to explain a bit this, because some filmmakers which are in Europe from Afghanistan, they were not able to develop. The ones who were children and they evacuated with their families to Europe, well, first to Iran, from Iran to Australia, or to Denmark, which was the other country that received this. They were not able to come back to the country. They were not able to come back also doing a film with all their experiences. I don't know what's going to happen with all that. Sorry about all this.
No. I think, you know, Afghanistan, yes, as you said, Afghanistan is in the center now, but this will be very temporary. You know, soon Afghanistan will be forgotten again, because Afghanistan was in this situation 20 years ago when 11/9 happened, you know. And that was actually the time that a lot of international filmmakers came to Afghanistan and made trash movies about Afghanistan. And those films stand now as a reference for, I don't know for how long time, for a very long time. And I think this time, maybe it's time for Afghan filmmakers who has the possibility to making film to change those references. Because now, as you said, once again, Afghanistan is on the focus. And I think it's time to change this reference, you know, with the knowledge of living in Afghanistan, with all the, you know, with the life experience, with everything, with watching all these bad films made by international, but also made by local, just to talk about Afghanistan in a different way, in a more deep way, you know. And I think that the bad thing about media is, like, once the highlight is truly on Afghanistan or on any other country, but then imagine like Taliban will stay in Afghanistan longer, and then we just accept it the way it is, and no more journalists or press are interested about Afghanistan. And this is very sad, because, you know, like, many people in Afghanistan, either they do not speak other languages, they do not speak English, so they cannot communicate with the world, or they are not expressive people, so they do not really share, they have not learned to share things, feelings, thoughts with other people. Even if they have the opportunity to talk or to speak, they are just simply cannot. They are just not able, And for example, my own parents, my father, he bought a house like years before when he was very young, and he never could live in that house. He never could enjoy that house. He went to Iran because of war, and he wanted to stay there only 1 month, and he stayed there 40 years. And then in 2001, after 11/9, we moved back to Afghanistan. And then, like a month ago, my father left his country again for the second time. And it was really sad for me, it was really sad for me to see him, because he's a farmer. And on the date that we left Afghanistan, it was the time that he had these potato fields, and it was the date that he's supposed to pick up the potatoes. And now he just, in the last month, he's just thinking about picking these potatoes. And it's just like, it's just very sad for me, because he never could express these feelings and this trauma, and he lived with that. And I know many people that are like my parents, and they cannot really talk about things. And I think this is the duty and responsibility of filmmakers, of artists, to talk about these suffers and this pain and this, stories and tales that they never had the chance to. And we are used to be introduced by other filmmakers, by international filmmakers, and we are used to look at ourselves from the point of view of others, which there's no problem on this, Everyone can talk about everything that they want. We live in a free world, let's say. But the thing is, we don't have our own cinema industry now, at the moment. We don't have our own language of cinema. If, for example, an American make a very bad film about Iran, the audience has the opportunity to see the version of American filmmaker, how he look at Iran, and then at the same time the point of view of Iranian filmmaker. So the audience is free to understand, to get his or her own understanding. But with Afghanistan, that's not the case. You only see this bad film about Afghanistan by international filmmaker who got, I don't know, Oscar or Cannes or Berlinale or whatever, and you don't have the chance to see the other option, like an Afghan film. And I think now that Afghanistan is on the center, it is temporary. People will forget it again. I'm sure. I bet. And it's just time for Afghan artists to deeply look, inside, and to talk about Afghanistan in a different way. And this needs a lot of courage and a lot of, you should really be taking the challenges, and because it's not really easy. It's not easy at all, because you're talking about something that is not existed. And you really have to find the right people to trust you and to believe on your art and on you as a personal, as an individual, and to let you explore these thoughts and make the final product. So I don't even know if I answered your question correctly. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I don't think that we have time for another question, but thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for sharing your experience and your knowledge with us. And we will see each other again.
Thank you very much.
And so ends this new episode of Zinemaldia podcast, a space included in the activities of the Thought and Discussion area. You can listen to more film talks and master classes on our website or on your favorite audio platform. See you next time!